What's going on, everybody? Listen, it's been a while since I've done a solo video, solo dolo. All right. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 3 lessons that I've learned during COVID. And quite frankly, these are really lessons that I've relearned. I've been working from home before COVID for a couple of years, and when I decided to transition to a co-working space, it was WeWork back then. Well, I say back then as if they don't exist. They do. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother time, by the way. WeWork. There's a documentary that showed up on Hulu about WeWork, and I'm interested in watching that because, yeah, me and WeWork, we have a love-hate relationship. However, the co-working space that I moved in, I was so appreciative of it because I didn't know it then until having worked 2 years in. I really was craving the connection with other people. I mean, it's cool that your family's here, but you want to be around other co-founders. You want to be around other individuals who are doing what you do. Ubering at one point became the highlight of like the break in between working from home because I was able to, depending on where you were Ubering. So, and so I kind of went down to the Aventura, Miami Beach, downtown Miami area because there are kinds of, well, not all the time, but, oftentimes you get professionals that are in your car and I would even network with them and we're exchanging LinkedIn information. So there was this desire to want to connect with other people. When I was a part of the WeWork community, I asked different people the same question and I got similar answers. They said, the reason why I switched over, why I had to leave my house, and some of them, they just lived blocks down the street. The one that I was in downtown Miami, like First Ave. The reason why, they said, is because we just needed to be around other people, other founders, people who are building and who are creating. And so, yeah, so it was a couple of years before COVID happened, I made that shift, and then COVID hits. It's like, okay, so we start all over again? Yep. I really didn't know what WFH meant until actually reading it in some article or something. And I thought it was an expletive, quite frankly, but it should be, because for those of us that have worked from home and then, feeling that freedom and then having to kind of, in a sense, be forced to work, to go back, it was, I don't want to say stifling, but it was very challenging. So here it is where, I'm back home now. There are three things that I've relearned. These are things that I've experienced before, but I think the pandemic has really reactivated or maybe heightened the awareness of what I probably knew or experienced in the past, but didn't really know how to put words to. So I think I can do that now. So let me do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share, as a matter of fact, and I'll be using some storytelling as well. So I'll do it that way as well. So let me do a few things here. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. Let's see if I get the chance here. So just bear with me, guys. I'm going to go ahead and share this first. So 2 seconds here. Let's see. And while I'm doing that, if you guys want to take notes, by all means, hopefully this will be helpful, this will be useful to you. I'm hoping that it will be. And okay, so cool. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so sharing my screen, and what I want us to do is, y'all know I like to doodle, but sometimes my doodles look like doo-doo. So we're just going to go ahead and share. Cool. Okay. So here's the first thing, or the 3 areas that we can talk about. And there's so many, guys, by the way, right? There's a plethora of lessons and ways to look at this thing. We're just going to look at 3 today, and we'll just kind of make it flow. I have no time frame for this. Quite frankly, I just said, you know what, because of and that's part of the changes, what I'm going to talk about now, but because of a lot of the construction that's been happening in the house, I was kind of delayed with kind of recordings and whatnot. So that's no excuse. Still got to put out content. So let's talk about the first one, relationships. My first lesson, or the biggest lesson, or maybe not the biggest, but perhaps one of the most important lessons that I've learned dealing with relationships in regards to COVID during this time, y'all. And by the way, feel free to comment. This is not like one of those lecture kind of things. This is going to be very fluid because it is live. The first lesson that I've learned in relationships, or the biggest one right now, has been, and this is where I'm going to start writing this down, y'all. Listen here. Boundaries. B-O-U. Let me see if I can spell boundaries properly. Okay. Boundaries is one of the biggest ones. What do I mean? Okay. Let me give you a great example about boundaries. So for those of you that are working from home and you don't have a separate office, you're either working in your room or you're working in a space, a co-shared space, or maybe a space that was agreed upon for you to do your work, and then you might have to tear everything down to have dinner, or tear everything down, for other people to be able to use it. So you're sharing this space, or it's a space that you can put up and then tear down like maybe weekly. That's my situation right now. The first thing, y'all, with boundaries. Now, for those of you that are just coming in, what's going on? Good to see y'all showing up. We're talking about the 3 lessons that I've learned, or really relearned, since COVID. I've learned this stuff before, but I think COVID is putting it now in a new light where I can articulate some of these things. There are 3 big areas. The first one is relationships and dealing with boundaries. This is for people who are the work from home culture, right? The WFH. And when we're dealing with boundaries, one of the best examples is just creating your own nook, your own space to do your work. And this is challenging because for a lot of us, like I said, we had offices and then we had to kind of move back in, especially when we were working from home first, and then we moved to the office, and then we had to move back. So now we can kind of understand maybe some of the frustrations. Boundaries is huge here because I had to do a few things in order for me to carve that out. So about 4 years ago, when I first moved back home, 4 years ago, I realized that the best way for me to create this space is to get a room divider. Hey, listen, y'all. Now, the room divider that I have, and I still have it to this day, it wasn't cheap, but it made a statement. It said, this is, I'm putting my stake in the ground. This is where I am working. Do not bother me. Do you think that made a difference at first? Nah, bruh. That ain't, it didn't make a difference. Why did it not make a difference? Okay, so there are a few things that you got to learn about how relationships evolve and then the expectations that people have. So the same way that I'm about to break this down for the office space is probably the same thing that you probably are going to need to understand when it comes to relationships in your own life. Okay, and by the way, we're just kind of improvising here because this wasn't the only things that I had set up. Is I'm going to talk about relationships, systems, and changes. So with this, when I first was working from home, I had an open space and I was entertaining conversations, and, anytime anything was needed that wasn't work related, I would go and I just kind of be of help, whatever the case was. And so it was very difficult now that I'm in my groove for the interruptions to start happening. And I'm like, I don't want to be rude, but I also need to get this work done. And it was difficult to create the space, especially if sometimes all you had were your earphones, right? So if you had, some, and here's the thing too. I actually created, this is the first step, was created the visual appearance that I was unavailable. So for those of y'all got some AirPods, y'all got some earbuds, but that wasn't enough, y'all. That wasn't enough. I actually had to like get some of these. Right? I had to get the big boys. I had to get the like, leave me alone. I'm working. Like, because people can't see a small little earbuds. Now, maybe if it's the AirPods because it's white, maybe visually they'll be able to understand. It's like, oh, okay, he's not ignoring me. He's just busy. He's in the zone. However, creating the visual appearance of your unavailability was huge for me when it came to establishing boundaries, right? Now, here's the thing. Sometimes that still wasn't the case, because if you're still able to, in a sense, see me, you also will think that I'm still accessible. Now, this is also happening in the workspace too. Like if you're in an office and you're in an open office platform or format, there are ways that you can create the unavailability. However, the difference is in an office space, it's understood you're in the office, you're working. In home, it's a little different. At home, especially if a lot of your work is happening on the computer, they may think, whoever they may be, siblings, parents, relatives, may think you're surfing the net, or you're doing graphic design, or you're looking for equipment, so they just think that you're shopping on Amazon for the sake of shopping. But the point is, there has to be some sort of visual effect that's going to show that there's a line that's being delineated. So that's what I did, guys. What I did was that was the first step. But the second step was, okay, you know what? I need to be able to create the boundary itself. So remind you, I have no room, right? There's no like huge room at first. So I had to like a literal 9 by 3. So like a 3 foot, like 3 tiles, 1, 2, 3, and then 9 tiles. So like a small rectangle where I did all of the work in this one small space. And I got a room divider to cover or to, to shield that space so that there's only one way in and kind of one way out. And I did that because now the message that I was giving, even though I've already articulated it verbally, like, hey, listen, when I'm working, this is what I'm doing. People really don't get it until you respect the boundary yourself. So here's what started to happen. Y'all think I'm playing it. Here's what started to happen. I actually shielded it off. But then, like, postal service would come and, they got mail. I would literally get like mail and they would like stick it through. I kid you, stick it through the partition. They're like, yo, you got some mail. Hey, they almost thought it was like cute or funny because it's different. They've never experienced somebody who's in this work from home culture who's taking it a little bit seriously. So the difference in it was kind of intriguing and kind of fun. But on the other end, you're just like, yo, I just need to zone out. I got to get this working. Guys, listen, after some time, what began to happen was the space started to be respected. Now, here it is. It's not that intentionally you have people who you're living with. I'm talking about our work from home culture individuals now. People who you're living with, they aren't intentionally doing it. It's not on purpose as much as it is an unconscious understand. I don't know what it is. It's a misunderstanding. I'm not sure what it is, but even if you lay down the law, you can have a 95 thesis mounted up on your partition if you want to. People won't get it until they actually start to see the pattern that, oh, they're really working. So I'm going to put here that, one of the things that you need here is there's got to be like some sort of visual reminder. You got to have a visual reminder, okay, to let people understand and to know how available or unavailable you are. Okay, so there's that. Here's the next thing that we're going to talk about is eventually what ended up happening is I was able to, under an agreement now, so we're now talking about using a larger part of the house to be able to set up everything, the lighting and all of that stuff, is consistency. So you also got to be consistently showing up, because if you don't, then that's the other thing. The other thing is when it's time for conversations, I would get up and I would move around and have the conversation outside of the office space that I created. And then when I was done, I would come back in and sit in the space and not have frivolous conversations or nothing that's related to work. Now, if there are emergencies or if there are exceptions to the rule, then yeah, I get that. But for the most part, you have to create a visual understanding of the space that you're in. Now, you can also do that relationally too, but I guess we'll talk about that for another time. Here's number 2, guys, systems. Okay, so systems is interesting. With systems, the best way to explain that is you need to have a routine. Now, I'm not going to talk about my morning routine, because right now my morning routine is more so like my evening routine, if that makes sense. Like I've become like the late night individual versus the early morning individual. I'm looking forward to shifting things eventually, but right now it's working. I'm keeping that. The difference between having a system and a goal is simply this. A goal is trying to get from point A to point B. A system is creating the steps in between point A to point B so that you can keep doing that for point C, point D, point E, point F, point G. Okay. And so what I realized was that one of the things that have shifted for me when it comes to my routine was specifically for clients. It was easier when I was out of my house to get people because I was always connecting and interacting. It started to shift when like guys, I still had gas in my tank from December all the way up until like 2 weeks ago, y'all. I wasn't going anywhere, right? So I'm on the other side of the spectrum where it's like, if you don't need to go anywhere, don't go nowhere unless for, specific emergencies or for essentials and stuff like that. That was the spectrum that I'm on. Now, The point is, what I'm trying to say is simply this. And by the way, that's about to shift because listen, there's only so much that you can take with the work from home culture, and it's been over a year. But we'll talk about that at another time. So here it is that we're looking at how am I going to create a new system for gaining clients? If before a lot of the connections happen one-on-one, face-to-face, having referrals and connecting with individuals, how's that going to shift now? So that was a big challenge for me. The big challenge was I now would need to create a way to do that. So one of the things that I did was I but I found people who are already doing it online. So for instance, I'll give you a great example, guys. So I'm looking at, this is the funnel hacker shirt, but this is from the ClickFunnels group. They're people who, Russell Brunson, I believe, is one of the individuals who has, or the person who's kind of created a system for how do you get people into your sales cycle so that you can just sell to them. And one of the hugest things, he just took my money again today. One of the hugest things that I realized is the upsell feature or part of the leverage that you're using for your sales funnel. The point is, though, you need to have a repeatable system, something that you can continue to do over and over and over again. And that's one of the things that I had to readjust now that I'm home most of the times. So for a lot of the work that I've been doing, LinkedIn has been the thing. Getting LinkedIn scripts for the DMs, right? Getting people in their inboxes, getting their attention and all of that. And then from there, what do you do next? Like, are you going to introduce them to something free or a great experience? And then from the experience, say, hey, listen, if you want to go deeper, then this is what you do. The point is, you have to create a system. And that's what I had to do. Here's another part of my system, guys. If I don't write in this, or if I don't open this for a day, my day's done. It's shot. That's the full focus planner. I always talk about that. If you don't have something that's in place to keep you doing the thing repeatedly, then the times that you feel stuck, you're going to feel as if you're not making progress, and you're going to look back and you didn't track anything. So you're going to feel as if you didn't do anything with your life. And there are going to be times when you will feel stuck, but you're still doing the thing. But because you've tracked it, you'll be able to look back in hindsight and say, oh, okay, well, you know what? It feels as if I'm not going anywhere, but at least I've done something. Because listen, guys, it got to a point that I think it was like maybe 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 months in, I stopped dressing up. Like I used to dress up, the khakis and all of that. And I started doing that when we got shut down. I was dressing up still, working. I'm like, you know what? This is only, 5 months. We'll be good. End of the year, be cool. Bruh, like maybe 4 or 5 months in, I was like, this is, this ain't happening. I'm feeling kind of itchy sitting down. After a while, I just said, okay, the system needs to change. All right, number 2. That's number 2. Number 3. Here's the third one, guys. Changes, disruptions, challenges, interruptions, whatever you want to call it. Here it is where recently what has happened to us is that first the kitchen got out of commission because of a pipe issue, and then the bathroom, and then the microwave. What I'm trying to say is simply this. There are a lot of things that are going to happen, and with those things that are happening, you have to embrace the change that's going on. Can you imagine that there has been consistent, like for a minute, there's been consistent like revamping or construction of the house for a minute, because there are certain parts of the house that has just kind of been after wear and tear and after years. We're talking about like decades, because after a while you got to shift things, you got to change things. After decades, things got to be the things that I've decided to extrapolate from changes. And I'm going to put here, sometimes it can be home. Sometimes it can be relationships. Sometimes it can be you. Sometimes things change. Here's one of the things that I've tried to extrapolate is when certain things change, how does that look to the bigger picture? So here's what started happening. So these guys started working in the house. I'm like getting so upset, like, man, like I'm so irate because like I'm not able to do my work. And yet, however, the things that need to be changed are very important and they need to be done. How oftentimes, and I had to think to myself, how oftentimes when I'm praying for certain things to be different or praying for a new season and certain things feel as if it's an interruption, am I complaining about the thing that's interrupting even though it's improving? And I had to ask myself, like, the times that I've gotten kind of irate because workers got to do what they need to do. Yet at the same time, I'm like, but I got to do what I need to do. But however, if they don't do what they need to do in the long term, I won't be able to do what I need to do. And so there is this mindset that I had to adopt, y'all. When I say adopt, I'm talking about like yesterday. This mindset that you got to adopt to be able to embrace that when change happens, sometimes you're going to be asking for a paint job to your house. And you're going to end up needing a whole total reconstruction of the house itself. And you'll be upset in the beginning. It'll feel like it's a huge disruption. It'll feel like it's a huge interruption. It'll feel like it's a huge inconvenience. But you'll be so much better off when you get to the root, not the symptoms, but the root of the issue, and all that stuff getting, is being torn up and redone and fixed properly. And then you get the paint, then you get all of the fancy stuff, the aesthetics over it. You'll be grateful in the long term. What am I saying? What I'm saying is that there are 3 lessons, guys, 3 lessons that I've relearned during this pandemic, and we'll probably go into each one of these at a deeper time. And in each 3 of these, I have stories for each one of them. Now, y'all already know that one of the changes that has happened for me has been being a business storytelling coach. And so with each of these pieces, I have an experience. I have a story that I can extrapolate, that I can pull from, that I can rely on to remember and to fortify why it is that having boundaries is important as part of the relationship circle. Why it is that having a consistent routine is important, especially for a sales cycle when it comes to systems. Why it is that having a better understanding, or a global, a more perhaps existential understanding of what things are happening in your home, what things are happening in your relationships, when you even feel like you're being upended because you are even shifting and you don't like how you're changing, but you're changing for the better. What it is that you should be focusing on in the big picture when it comes to changes. So guys, relationships, systems, changes. I'm looking forward to maybe one day just going through these again and, us kind of diving a little bit deeper. But for now, I just want you to know that for a lot of you, a lot of us that are still in the work from home culture, it doesn't mean, and here's the key, just because we're not maybe out and about as we used to. Now, some of y'all are reckless out there and y'all just don't even care, but I ain't talking about you. I'm talking about those of y'all who have significantly shifted your entire social life, your work, right? Your professional life, your experiences and everything. And you are now more so confined, or if not by choice, constrained to the home more, and your home and work life are kind of being more blended. And you may have been a person of more so home life, work life balance versus work life integration. I just learned about that. Those are 2 separate things, which is pretty cool, but that's for another time too. But what I'm saying is that there are still many lessons that can be learned in the home. There are still many lessons that you can pull and to extrapolate, and stories that you can still glean from just being in the same spot every day. I'll leave you with this. So and I got to do it more because I stopped doing it, but going out to the backyard and just relaxing, or just sitting outside or standing outside. And I realized that whenever I would show up at the same time every day, I would start to see specific things start to shift. I would see, creatures, animals that are, well, not animals, I shoot animals, but like creatures or insects that decide to set themselves up, in certain parts, or, flies or certain birds, or that just come almost at the same time, and they have their own routine and their own pattern. But because I'm showing up at the same time, I'm also able to learn how the environment around me is also coexisting. It's a huge world, even if it's just 6 feet away from you. So I want you guys to be encouraged, because I know how challenging it can be for a lot of us in the work from home culture, where we may feel as if things are not really, things are mundane, things are boring. Be encouraged, and just know that there is going to come a time where you're going to have to ask yourself, if you haven't already done this, you're going to have to ask yourself, what did I get from this experience? Write it down. Write it down. You'd be so amazed of all of the different things that have happened, that have been occurring all around you. You just got to open your eyes. Open your eyes, and you will see that there's so many lessons to be learned, and so many stories around them that you can tell yourself, maybe even to your children, or to your children's children one day. And yeah. All right, guys, be blessed. I got to take this call. Perhaps I might come back and do something else with this, but yeah, be blessed, guys. Like really be blessed. Oh, and by the way, this right here, this is not lint. It's gray hair. Listen, gray hairs are the most disrespectful type of extension to the, I don't know what it is, but they are the pieces on a person's body that just, they have no regard. No, they don't care. It's the pieces that don't want to be groomed, and I refuse to pluck it. I refuse to pluck them. You don't keep them now. Don't keep them now. Hey, stories about this too. Listen, there's stories all around you. Maybe I should retitle this Stories All Around Us, because that's exactly what it is. You can learn a lot just by your surroundings. Even if you don't think that there are things to learn and to experience, there are. And more than just on social media, guys. I'm talking about in your immediate presence around you, the people, the systems, and the changes that are going on in your very home. All right, guys.